August 15th, 1969. Bethel, New York. Over 400,000 people flocked to a dairy farm for the Woodstock Music and Art Fair. What began as a concert transforms into a cultural revolution. As the sun rises, iconic performances from Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and The Who electrify the crowd, all set against a backdrop of peace, love, and community. Despite rain and mud, the spirit of togetherness prevails, with attendees sharing food and shelter. In just 4 days, Woodstock becomes a symbol of the 1960s counterculture, a dream of harmony that resonates through the ages, leaving an indelible mark on music and society. January 15th, 2009, 3:25 p.m. U.S. Airways Flight 1549 takes off from New York's LaGuardia Airport. Just minutes later, catastrophe unfolds. Both engines fail after a bird strike. Captain Chesley "Sully" Sullenberger faces an impossible choice. With no time to reach an airport, he makes a bold decision to land on the Hudson River. The plane touches down, skidding across the water. Miraculously, all 155 passengers and crew survive. The world watched as the miracle on the Hudson became a symbol of calm under pressure and extraordinary heroism. November 22nd, 1963. President John F. Kennedy arrives in Dallas, Texas, on a campaign trip, aiming to mend political rifts. The streets lined with enthusiastic supporters as his motorcade rolls through the city, Texas Governor John Connally at his side. At 12:30 p.m., shots ring out from the Texas School Book Depository. JFK is hit. Chaos erupts as the car speeds away. In just seconds, a nation holds its breath as news spreads that the president has been shot. Immediately, he is rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital, but despite the efforts of doctors, he is pronounced dead at 1 p.m. It's November 9th, 1989, a day that changed the world. The Berlin Wall, a symbol of division, is about to fall. Built in 1961, the Berlin Wall separated East and West Berlin, a physical and ideological barrier of the Cold War. Families were torn apart. People risked everything to escape. But by the late 1980s, discontent was brewing. Citizens of East Germany began protesting for freedom, inspired by movements across Eastern Europe. On that fateful day in November, a botched press conference led to a misunderstanding. People thought the border was open. Thousands surged toward the wall, and guards, caught off guard, were overwhelmed. Suddenly, the wall was no longer a barrier. It was a gateway. Cheers erupted as East and West Berliners celebrated together, chipping away at the wall, a powerful symbol of freedom and unity. The fall of the Berlin Wall didn't just reunite a city, it marked the beginning of the end for the Soviet Union and the Cold War, reshaping Europe forever. September 11th, 2001, at 8:46 a.m., a plane crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 17 minutes later, another hits the South Tower. New York is under attack. At 9:37, a third plane hits the Pentagon, and at 10:03, passengers on Flight 93 fight back, bringing the plane down before it could hit its target. By 10:28, both towers collapse. Nearly 3,000 lives are lost. It wasn't just an attack, it redefined security and the world. September 11th united a grieving nation. Its impact still felt today. April 10th, 1912. The RMS Titanic sets sail from Southampton, bound for New York, hailed as an unsinkable ship, a marvel of luxury and innovation. As the ship navigates the icy North Atlantic, warnings of icebergs flood in, but the Titanic races on at full speed, confidence running high. On April 15th at 11:40 p.m., disaster strikes. The Titanic collides with an iceberg, a massive gash ripping through its hull. Panic erupts. Passengers scramble for lifeboats, but only 20 are available for over 2,200 souls on board. By 2:20 a.m., the Titanic disappears beneath the frigid waves, claiming over 1,500 lives. April 26, 1986. A routine safety test goes horribly wrong at Reactor 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the Soviet Union. An explosion erupts, releasing radiation across Europe. Firefighters rush in, unaware of the deadly fallout. Pripyat, a city of 49,000, is only 3 kilometers away, but evacuations are delayed, and residents are left exposed to toxic radiation as the Soviet government tries to cover up the disaster. News leak out, igniting global alarm. Chernobyl becomes the worst nuclear disaster in history, with devastating impacts still felt today, a disaster that changed our view of nuclear power forever. August 31st, 1997. At 12:20 a.m., Princess Diana leaves the Ritz Hotel in Paris after a lavish dinner, pursued by paparazzi. In an attempt to escape the cameras, she and her companion, Dodi Fayed, hop into their car and speed off into the night. A chase ensues as paparazzi tail them in motorbikes. Just 3 minutes later, at 12:23 a.m., tragedy strikes as their vehicle crashes in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. Emergency services arrive swiftly, and the world holds its breath. Finally, news breaks. At 4 a.m., Princess Diana, her companion, and their driver are pronounced dead, sparking global mourning for the people's princess. March 11th, 2011, Japan is rocked by a massive earthquake. Minutes later, a towering tsunami slams into the coast, sweeping away entire towns. But worse follows. At the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, the tsunami disables cooling systems. Reactors overheat and explode. Radioactive material is leaked into the air. Panic spreads as over 150,000 people are forced to flee their homes. Entire cities become ghost towns overnight. This was the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. July 20th, 1969, a day that changed everything. Apollo 11 is about to land on the moon. But it wasn't just a scientific mission. It was a race against the Soviets. After the USSR launched Sputnik, America needed a win. As Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin descended, alarms went off. The computer was overloaded. With fuel running low, Armstrong had to land manually. Finally, touchdown. Armstrong's voice echoed, "The Eagle has landed." The world held its breath. Armstrong stepped onto the moon. One small step for man. One giant leap for mankind. June 5th, 1967. With tensions escalating, Israel faces an imminent threat as Egypt, Syria, and Jordan mass forces along its borders. With a preemptive strike, Israel disables the Egyptian Air Force. As the war expands, Israel also battles Syria and Jordan. Within days, they seize the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. The Arab forces are overwhelmed. In just 6 days, Israel triples its territory, changing the Middle East forever. August 29th, 2005. Hurricane Katrina strikes New Orleans as a Category 5 storm. The city prepares for the worst, but the disaster escalates when the levees collapse, unleashing the floodwaters. By the next morning, 80% of New Orleans is underwater. Thousands are trapped, leading to a humanitarian crisis. The Superdome is transformed into a makeshift shelter. But chaos ensues. Resources are scarce, and help is slow to arrive. In the aftermath, over 1,800 lives are lost, and the destruction totals an estimated $125 billion. October 16th, 1962. President John F. Kennedy learns of Soviet missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida. 2 days later, he announces a naval blockade. Tensions soar as US forces mobilize. Soviet ships approach the blockade, and the world holds its breath. Nuclear war could erupt at any moment. On October 27th, a US spy plane is shot down over Cuba, escalating fears of retaliation. But on October 28th, a breakthrough. Khrushchev agrees to dismantle the missiles in exchange for a US promise not to invade. The crisis ends, but it serves as a stark reminder of the fragile line between peace and destruction. December 25, 1991. An empire collapses. The Soviet Union officially dissolves, ending over 70 years of communist rule. In the late 80s, economic struggles and political unrest soared. Gorbachev's reforms, glasnost and perestroika, aimed to revive the system but led to chaos. In 1991, republics like Ukraine declared independence, and a failed coup against Gorbachev accelerated the collapse. Gorbachev resigns, the hammer and sickle flag is lowered, and the USSR splits into 15 nations. This moment reshaped global politics and marked the end of the Cold War, changing the world forever. September 28, 1928. St. Mary's Hospital, London, England. In his laboratory, Alexander Fleming makes a remarkable discovery that will revolutionize medicine. Noticing that a mold called penicillium notatum inhibits bacterial growth, he realizes its potential as an antibiotic. This breakthrough leads to the development of penicillin, the first true antibiotic, saving over 200 million lives and drastically changing the landscape of medicine and providing effective treatment for bacterial infections. May 6, 1937. The Hindenburg, the largest ship ever built, a symbol of luxury and airship dominance, descends toward New Jersey. But in seconds, everything changes. At 7:25 p.m., a spark ignites. The sky lights up as flames race across the massive airship. Onlookers can only watch in horror as the Hindenburg collapses in a fiery blaze. 36 lives are lost in mere moments. The disaster shocks the world, ending the era of passenger airships forever and leaving a lasting scar on aviation history. December 7th, 1941. Early morning, Pearl Harbor is under surprise attack by Japan. Explosions rock the U.S. naval base in Hawaii. Within minutes, battleships are hit hard. The USS Arizona sinks with over 1,000 crew members trapped. In just 2 hours, more than 2,400 Americans are dead. The U.S. Pacific Fleet is in ruins. But this wasn't just an attack. It's what pulled America into World War II. The next day, President Roosevelt calls it a date which will live in infamy. America was now at war, and history would never be the same. January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs steps onto the stage at Macworld in San Francisco, holding a device that would change the world, the first iPhone. Apple had been redefining technology, but this was different. Combining a phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator into one, the iPhone was unlike anything seen before. It revolutionized how we communicate, work, and interact with technology. People line up for days to get their hands on it, and in just 74 days, Apple sells over 1 million units. August 5th, 2010. A collapse deep in the San Jose mine traps 33 miners over 2,000 feet underground. For 17 days, rescuers search desperately, but there's no sign of life. Then, a breakthrough. On August 22nd, a drill reaches their refuge, and a note emerges. We are alive. A global effort begins to save them. Engineers work around the clock, drilling a rescue shaft. Finally, on October 13th, after 69 days underground, The first miner is pulled to safety. One by one, all 33 are rescued, a story of hope and survival that gripped the world. June 11th, 2010. The world unites in South Africa for the first FIFA World Cup on the African continent. With vibrant celebrations, the tournament kicks off in front of an electrifying crowd at Soccer City Stadium in Johannesburg. Fans from around the globe gather to support their teams, showcasing the spirit of unity and diversity. The tournament features unforgettable moments, including the stunning performances by players like Diego Forlan and the iconic Vuvuzela horn that becomes the soundtrack of the event. As Spain captures its first World Cup title by defeating the Netherlands in a thrilling final, the tournament leaves a lasting legacy of hope, pride, and the transformative power of sports. August 28, 1963. Washington, D.C. Over 250,000 people gather for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, a pivotal event in the fight for civil rights. Led by Martin Luther King Jr., the march demands economic justice and racial equality. As the crowd fills the National Mall, King delivers his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, envisioning a future free from discrimination. His words resonate across the nation, igniting a movement for change. This powerful gathering captures the nation's attention and inspires generations, reinforcing the ongoing struggle for justice and equality. 1921. In Canada, researchers Frederick Banting and Charles Best make a revolutionary discovery. At the University of Toronto, they isolate the hormone that regulates blood sugar levels, insulin, paving the way for diabetes treatment. Before this breakthrough, diabetes was a fatal disease with no treatment. But by 1922, insulin becomes available to patients, improving their lives and transforming diabetes from a death sentence into a manageable condition. This Canadian innovation not only saves millions of lives, but also earns the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 1923.